Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Her Story TV and the Her Story podcast. This is Gertrude Macha here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And I want to start off the show with an acknowledgement of the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. Welcome, welcome, welcome back to the show, everybody. I am excited to introduce another amazing guest, creative woman. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, how old you are, and share your story with us today.
Hi, my name is Denise Martin. I'm here in rainy Portland, Oregon, and I'm 65 years old. And I became the accidental face of homelessness in my city, Portland, Oregon, last summer. And I want to use the celebrity I bumped into to change the conversation about homelessness, how people become homeless, and what they need to get out of that ditch. And my recent stint with homelessness because of COVID helped me understand that I'd kind of been in denial most of my life about how insecure I've been housing-wise. And I'm realizing now, as I really dive into evaluating my own story, that poverty is a mindset. And the more you stumble in and the deeper you get into poverty, the harder it is to shift that mindset to find your way out. So that's one of the many issues I want to help address. But what happened to me is one moment I had a life. I was an entertainer in Las Vegas. I'm an electric harpist. I wasn't rolling in dough, but I was secure, had a home, and my son and I were making it. And the next day, the whole town closed because of a pandemic. And I moved into my car. I returned to Oregon and parked my son in a friend's garage on a couch. And I lived in my car, pulling my harp out of the trunk and busking my way through a pandemic. And I called myself the Beverly Hills of the homeless because I had an expensive car. I was warm and comfortable at night, and I could pull my harp out anywhere and make some cash. But it costs a lot of money to live in a car and travel around and find a safe place to park and stay and sleep. Well, July of last year, I wrote an op-ed to my local paper. We have a big problem with homelessness here in Portland, Oregon, as I know the rest of the world is struggling with. We have a tent city on every sidewalk, and it just keeps getting worse. And the conversation is getting worse. So I wrote an op-ed to explain why the stigma around homelessness is why we can't solve the problem. I became Portland's face of homelessness after that op-ed hit. And people were visiting me, mostly the wealthy, because I was playing in front of a wealthy restaurant on the waterfront in Portland. And the conversation was always about how the homeless are just drug addicts and they're lazy. And no matter how much I talked until I was blue in the face, I was really having a hard time changing that stigma. The first time I landed into homelessness was because of domestic violence. The second time I was employed by a man who turned out to be a fraud. And when I realized I had no paychecks, I was evicted with a child. And this last time, a pandemic wiped me out at the knees. So the idea that everyone who lands in homelessness is just lazy and they messed up their life or they just blew all their money on drugs is just not true. And putting us all in the same category anyway will never work. We're not the same. We have different levels of economic background. We have different levels of intelligence. We have different skill sets. We have way different levels of trauma that may have sent us to the street. We have been banged up, lots of domestic violence, families bounced to the streets, So if we're just going to assume that all of these people are lazy drug addicts, we certainly can't solve this problem. So I was lucky enough to attract more media attention, and the local news channel followed my story. And I made my way into motels where my son and I were spending $2,400 a month to have a roof over our head. And I couldn't get out of that cycle. I was strumming my little fingers to death and borrowing money. And I couldn't, it was very difficult in a minimum wage job, which I had picked up, to overcome that. I couldn't make enough money to get out of the motels. It was just an endless, endless loop. And finally was able to get some help and put away enough money I could get into a home. And now I'm spending half of what I was spending in motels. My son and I share a room in a home. So now we're a little more stable. And with this newfound stability, I have started a whole new venture to try and change the conversation around homelessness, to raise money for the causes and the organizations that are already out there doing brilliant work, and to build an instant village here in Portland, Oregon. I know it sounds like a lot from a woman who's barely housing secure myself, but I can barely sleep at night thinking about all the people I left behind on the street. I want people to know that working for a company like Amazon is like being on a plantation. There's just, you can't work hard enough. It feels like there's someone behind you with a whip every moment. They demand you work overtime. It's physically exhausting. And I was homeless, living in my car in their parking lot. I couldn't work that hard without a place to live and eat and survive. Couldn't do it. Had the same experience at FedEx, trying to throw thousands of pounds of freight a day. Homeless, tired, hungry. It's crazy. And if you should lose a job like that, or you can't keep up, or they cut your hours, boom, then you become one of those people on the sidewalk. I want to tell this story because what I want people to get from my story is that but for the grace of God go I. I had a friend, my running buddy at the time, and I had a friend who was very wealthy. And we were homeless. We were going from Portland to LA to an opportunity to share some housing or an organic farm, be of service. And we stopped to see him in Northern California. Man had millions. He made us buy our own coffee, knowing that we had nothing. And that was really the food money we were spending. But we stopped and spent our only money of the day to have coffee with this wealthy man. Well, fast forward 2 years later, and Paradise, California burned down. And there he was standing in his driveway with his 2 dogs. He still had millions in the bank, but he was so overwhelmed about losing his whole life in an instant that guess who he called for comfort? The homeless people. Hey, they'll know what to do. Even with all that money in the bank, he could not cope with the idea that his life just went sideways. And throughout COVID, I can't imagine how many people just went from a real life to their small business closing, and boom, next thing you know, they're in a tent on the sidewalk. So first, we have to boots on the ground interview the homeless population in our city, find out who's so mentally ill that we've got to find them treatment and a way to pay for it immediately. Find out who's fleeing domestic violence and needs safety and a shelter bed immediately. Find out who's willing to work, who's able to work, and get them a phone and a shower and a way to keep that phone charged so they can communicate with an employer. You cannot get a job without a cell phone. Everything's electronic. I went to 5 businesses to get my last job. 3 of them told me to apply online. So the old 1920s, go to the back of the restaurant and ask for work, just doesn't apply anymore. People have to be tech savvy to get a job. Really hard to do in a tent. And the bathroom situation has gotten insane. with COVID. So even a person with the best intentions of going out on a job interview can't even find a place to relieve themselves or freshen up. We have to help people out of the ditch. There's no such thing as just pull yourself up by the bootstraps in homelessness anymore. There's just too many people flooding the system. So it's going to have to be us, private citizens, reaching out to our fellow earthlings, our global roommates, and helping. I wouldn't have made it off the streets without help. Family members, strangers, associates, my workplace, everybody. It takes a village to get a person off the street. So I'm creating a new endeavor, a portal for raising money for homeless causes called Harpioki. And I'm going to have a celebrity version called Celebrity Harpioki for the homeless, where celebrities can pop in via Zoom, just like I am today from the other side of the world, sing a song with us, and encourage our viewers to give to the organizations that are helping on a global level, on a national level, and here on a local level, to get those funds flowing to organizations who already know what to do. And then I want to use my rising star with that exposure to keep changing the conversation. The homeless on the streets of Portland need cell phones. They need more bathrooms. We need little charging ports where they can get their phone charged. We need showers. And we need to talk to those people instead of having city meetings to decide where to move them or how to disrupt their lives. So that's this phase of my life. I've lived kind of large and wild in my poverty, in my housing insecurity. After growing up rich and privileged, I get a unique perspective. I've seen it all, and I've been privileged to do it all with a fairly hefty IQ and an open mind. And I'm coming to the table with a voice for the homeless who don't have one.
Wow. Denise, what an incredible story. You know, for a lot of us who look at the US from the outside, everybody's under the impression that the streets of the United States are paved with gold. Until I came and lived in the US for a while, I had that impression too. But you're so right that just basic things can be a block to block somebody finding a job, getting employment, just washing and freshening up so you are presentable to go for an interview, charging a phone, internet access. And the United States is the first world country, but people are living under the poverty line, just like in third world countries right now. There's a lot of work that needs to be done there. Now, housing insecurity, especially for women over 50, is a big issue. It's not just in the US. I'm seeing it here in Australia, in New Zealand. A lot of women find themselves at a later part of their lives. Some were married, went through divorces, lost everything, were totally dependent on their husbands, and then they're on the street. So if you could have a conversation with a woman right now who's comfortable, who's married, who has everything, but relies totally on a husband or a partner, if you could give somebody 3 nuggets of wisdom to prepare for the eventuality of something like this happening to them, what would you say?
Well, I don't want to assume that they might be exposed to domestic violence and just have to fly out a door with a baby in the arms like I did, or a husband who's just gonna go sideways and harm them. But the simplest things can make your life go sideways. I am 65, and I was planning my retirement with my very best friend. We've been working together on natural health and spiritual things for the last 25 years. And we had a plan to work our way to the grave together. And he passed away in February of cancer. And boom, I'm totally alone with starting a whole new plan for my retirement. And yeah, I'm scared to death. And I am so gifted. I'm so blessed. I have so many outs compared to a woman who spent her life dependent on someone else. I've had to be independent all my life. I would counsel them to assume that anything could happen, tragic or amazing, that you might end up alone. And what does that look like? Who is going to help you if you have a problem? How are you going to reinvent your life in a moment like I had to, when the whole darn city I was living in closed? You couldn't even walk down the sidewalk. And so I think independence of mind, and you, no matter how well we prepare, the future can just wipe us out in a heartbeat, like my very wealthy friend found out. But we can enforce ourselves. We can believe how powerful we are, that we can overcome. And what I'm finding is you got to build a village. I had all my eggs in that one beautiful man's basket. We weren't husband and wife, we were best friends, but every day we filled up each other's lives. And now here I am alone. So I should have built a village, and I'm now building a village. So no matter how secure you are in your beautiful marriage, or with all your adult children, or whatever bosom family you are attached to, widen your circle, create a bigger village. And that village needs you as much as you need them.
Very, very wise advice. And it does take a village for all of us to survive. Wow. So now you've created this idea for a nonprofit.
No,
and I know
it's not. It's a venture philanthropy project, so that I can bring in sponsors, I can bring in corporations that want to make money off of us. But the entire point of it is to point people towards the organizations that need their dollars and ask them to give after we gift them with some fabulous free entertainment.
I love that. So where do you see yourself at the age of 100? If I was to take you into the future and you could look back at your life, and you're sitting now in your rocking chair with your dogs and your cats, maybe a grandchild or two, if you could have a conversation with this wise woman who's taken you this far, because she's leading you there, what would you say to her based on how you're living your life now?
I'm just starting Denise's life at 65. I had to, every time I got started on a dream, I went sideways. And the last time it was because I birthed a beautiful child and just had to, put my dream down and take care of him. But who I want to be at 100 is Betty White and Michelle Obama all wrapped up in one. I love comedy and music, and I want to use my big personality to get the world's attention. And then I want to educate them about domestic violence, about poverty, about homelessness, and make it fun. That's why I'm doing venture philanthropy. It's okay to make money, but let's spend it generously on everything that needs to be done. And let's make it fun. I'm being hounded every day in my email box, like I'm sure all of you are, by politicians and organizations desperate for my currently unavailable cash. But I want to make it fun for people to get involved, for people to be part of the community, for people to give. And I want to give them something fun back. And I think I got another 35 years of that in me.
Absolutely fantastic. Denise, thank you so much.
I don't know how to thank you for this opportunity. I watched your TED Talk, and in between the tears and the sobbing, I was just blown away.
We're all doing a little something to change the world, right? For me, it's one child at a time, one woman's story at a time. It just gives me great pleasure to be able to create a platform that amplifies these stories and amplifies these voices. So thank you for taking the time to do this interview.
It's my great pleasure. Thank you for the work you do.
And thank you to everybody who's tuned in today. The world is in a very funny place right now. The world is in crisis. It doesn't matter where you look. It doesn't matter which way you turn. And I like to share the Ubuntu philosophy. A lot of people think Ubuntu is an operating system by Linux, which it is. The African philosophy teaches you to put your family first, your community next, and if you have anything to spare, do something somewhere else in the world. And Denise, you are truly a living example of Ubuntu.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I'll be back again tomorrow with yet another amazing guest. Denise, don't go away. And I will be with you sharing these amazing stories. Have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world. Bye for now.